Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. We'll just give a few seconds for more folks to join. We have a lot to cover, so we'll be quick. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. In today's session, we'll walk through how to test real forms for accessibility and remediate them at the same time. This is not about theory, and it's not about accessibility as a checklist today. It's about what accessibility actually looks like when you're working with real forms, real constraints, and real tools. My name is Aisha Vyas, and I'll be guiding you through the context, the standards, and what to look for as we go. And I'm joined by Lavanya Jivakan, who will be demonstrating the live remediation portion of the session. Together, we'll look at how accessibility issues show up in production forms, how they impact users, and how they can be fixed directly in AEMForms Designer without rebuilding everything from scratch. By the end of the session, you should have a much clearer idea of what accessible forms look like in practice, how testing and remediation work together, how the fixes we apply map back to WCAG and regulatory expectations. This is a technical session, but it's designed to be practical and realistic, especially if you're responsible for maintaining or remediating existing forms. With that, let's get started. Quick housekeeping note, this session is being recorded and will be shared after the webinar. Again, my name is Aisha Vyas, and I'm Strategic Solution Architect at 4Point. I've been with 4Point for more than 5 years, working closely with organizations that rely heavily on digital forms and complex workflows. A core part of my work is centered on accessibility, making sure the way people interact with forms actually works for different abilities, devices, and real world situations. I spend a lot of time helping teams understand how accessibility shows up in practice, especially in forms that are already in use and are already critical to business processes. Alongside that, my role also focuses on innovation in forms, particularly where AI can help reduce friction, improve accuracy, and support modernization. The interesting part for me is where accessibility and AI intersect in very practical ways. Well, outside of work, I love reading mysteries, such as Agatha Christie being one of my favorites. And I really enjoy how Poirot takes something very complicated and pieces it together until it finally makes sense, which is probably not too far off from how I feel about untangling forms and complicated workflows. With that, I am really glad you're here, and I'm looking forward to walking through this conversation with you. I'll pass it on to Lavanya for her introduction.
Hey, thanks, Aisha. Hi, all. I'm Lavanya Jeevagan. I've been working with 4Point for about a decade, like around 10 years. I'm the AEMForms solution expert working here at 4Point. My keen interests are generally to try delivering complex solutions to different customers. Well, when I mean complex solutions, there are different scenarios like integrating the forms with different data models and as such. Also, currently extremely passionate about how we can utilize AI in empowering the current solutions and also trying to find out quicker and efficient ways of delivering these solutions to customers. That way, I have found a lot of many different interesting facts and factors as to how AEM forms can lead to innovation and different robust solutions for current customers as well as upcoming customers. I can foresee how different solutions can be part of AEM forms and help the customers make their way to production. Also, because this is all about AEM forms and delivering it, and I'm majorly involved in all these kind of forms development and integration with different environments, my focus majorly on everyday day-to-day activities, how to integrate these forms and also modernize these forms with latest frameworks, with latest cloud deployments, with latest all other kind of CI/CD pipelines, and so on. So I'm majorly focused on that and very much keenly interested in understanding the problems that lie behind it so that the legacy solutions can be seamlessly migrated to the cutting edge technologies these days, especially empowered by AI tools. So that is my real focus these days. Well, out of work, I am a passionate dancer. I would love dancing different styles, and every time I try doing it, I also try choreographing different styles with different teams and groups. Well, that's about me. Thank you.
That's amazing. Thank you, Lavanya.
Thanks, Aisha.
All right, moving on. You are welcome to drop questions into the chat as we go. And we won't stop to answer them during the presentation, but we'll save the questions for the very end. So here's how we'll spend our time today. We'll start with a brief overview of accessibility requirements across different countries and regions, and then talk about the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG, focusing on how WCAG ties back to those accessibility requirements. From there, we'll move into automated and manual testing of two PDFs. This is where you will see how tools and manual checks complement each other and why relying only on one gives you an incomplete picture. Next is live remediation. Lavanya will fix accessibility issues in real time so you can see what actually changes in the document and why those changes matter. After the demo, we will cover the key takeaways, focusing on what we saw during the remediation, the issues we discovered, and the approach we took to fix them. Then I'll walk through WCAG mapping, connecting the fixes you just saw to the specific success criteria so that it's clear how remediation supports compliance. From there, we'll talk about scaling accessibility with AI, looking at how automation can help you when you're dealing with large number of forms, ongoing audits, and the need to maintain accessibility over time, not just as one-off effort. And finally, we'll wrap up with VoiceForms, looking briefly at how AI can improve the ways people interact with forms while keeping existing systems and processes intact. Now, why accessibility matters? Answer is simple, because it's no longer an edge case. Today, organizations must make their forms and online services accessible if they want to provide access for everyone. Forms are often the gateway to critical services for many users, and this is the only way they interact with the organization. And accessibility is not optional anymore. It's the law. It's a civil right requirement backed by clear regulation, defined standard, and real deadlines with enforcement behind them. But beyond compliance, there's a very real user experience impact. Accessible forms are easier to understand, faster to complete, and far less likely to be abandoned. When people can confidently complete a form without confusion, guesswork, or frustration, everyone wins. And that leads directly to business benefits. Accessibility improvements don't just help users with disabilities. They improve accuracy, reduce errors, lower support costs, and increase completion rates for all users. Because when forms are accessible, they help organizations achieve their goals, which is efficiency, compliance, reliable data. while allowing users to achieve theirs, completing what they came to do with clarity and confidence. Now, a question that often comes up at this point is what rules and regulations actually apply to us? The short answer is that accessibility rules vary depending on where you are. Every country has its own legislation, and within that, individual states or provinces may have additional requirements on top of the federal ones. Keeping our time constraints in mind, I have pulled together some of the most common and relevant regulations to give you a clear picture. Let's start with the United States. In the US, accessibility requirements are driven at the federal level by Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, and Section 508. Both apply directly to digital documents and forms. Under ADA, WCAG 2.1 AA level is the technical compliance standard, while Section 508 currently aligns to WCAG 2.0 level AA. In addition to the federal rules, requirements can also vary by state. Some states like California and New York reinforce these expectations through their own accessibility policies, and both require adherence to WCAG level AA as well. Now let's move north to Canada. Accessibility is addressed at both federal and provincial levels. At the federal level, the Accessible Canada Act, which is ACA, applies primarily to federally regulated industries, such as banking, transportation, and telecommunications. The Act focuses on identifying and removing barriers with WCAG level AA, serving as the practical benchmark for digital accessibility. At the provincial level in Ontario, Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, or AODA, is the most well-known example and requires WCAG level AA for digital content. Other provinces are also moving in the same direction. For example, British Columbia's Accessible BC Act and Quebec's standard for digital accessibility are aligned with WCAG expectations as well, with most aiming for at least WCAG 2.0 level AA compliance. Now we take a step across to Europe. Again, the legislation is different, but outcome is very similar. The EU has two major accessibility initiatives: the Web Accessibility Directive, which focuses on public sector websites and documents, and the European Accessibility Act, which extends accessibility requirements to a broader range of digital products and services. And rather than referencing WCAG directly in law, EU uses a harmonized technical standard called EN 301549. That standard is built directly on WCAG level AA with a few additional requirements for certain type of information and communication technology systems. So while the legislation itself looks different, the technical expectation is very familiar. In summary, although the laws and enforcement models vary by region, the underlying expectation is remarkably consistent. Across the US, Canada, and the EU, most regulations point to WCAG level AA as the minimum baseline. That's why WCAG becomes common language for accessibility across regions, industries, and platforms. As you probably noticed, while the regulations vary by country, they all point back to the same standard, which is WCAG. So let's spend some time looking at WCAG itself and how it fits into everything we just discussed. WCAG is built around four key principles: perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. Perceivable means that information and user interface components must be presented in ways user can actually perceive. In simple terms, the content cannot be invisible to someone's senses. If a user can't see it, hear it, or otherwise perceive it, then from their perspective, it doesn't exist, no matter how technically correct the form is. Operable, it means users must be able to operate the interface. The experience cannot depend on interactions that a user cannot perform. If someone can't use a mouse, needs more time, or relies on screen reader, the form still needs to work fully, not partially. Understandable means that both the information and the way the interface behaves must make sense and is not confusing. Users should understand what's being asked of them and how to move forward. And finally, robust. It means the content must be reliable across wide variety of user agents, including assistive technologies, because accessibility cannot be fragile. It needs to keep working as browsers, screen readers, and platforms evolve, not break with the next update. So when organizations address all these four principles together, accessibility stops being a series of patches and it becomes durable. And that's the difference between reacting to issues and building experiences that actually last. Now let's talk about how accessibility is actually measured, because this is where a lot of confusion comes in. WCAG gives us something really important: clear, testable success criteria. This isn't subjective. Each requirement can be evaluated. It either passes or it fails. And that's what makes accessibility measurable, consistent, and enforceable. When we talk about conformance, we are really talking about how many of those criteria you actually meet and at what level. At the base level, we have level A, which covers the most fundamental accessibility needs. And then on top of that, we have level double A. And this is built on level A, and it is where most legal and regulatory expectations sit today. And then level AAA is the highest and the most stringent level. It's built on A and double A, but it is not always realistic to achieve everywhere. The key thing I want to stress here is this: accessibility isn't about aiming for the highest level on the day one. It's about understanding where you are today, what level you're expected to meet, and making intentional progress towards that without relying on fragile patches. Before we move on, I want to quickly talk about WCAG versions because we've been talking about them. The current version is WCAG 2.2. It's important to note that WCAG 2.2 builds on the previous versions, which are 2.0 and 2.1, rather than replacing them. And for all new projects or new accessibility work, 2.2 should be used as a reference point. You may also hear about 3.0, which is referred to as Silver. This is still very much in the drafting phase. While it's expected to address similar accessibility needs, WCAG 3.0 will have different structure, a different conformance model, and a broader scope. So far, we have covered the rules and the standards. Now, the real question is, what does this look like in practice? We'll cover that in the demo. But before we jump into the demo, I want to set a bit of context for what you're about to see. We'll be working with two real PDF forms, not sample designed for training. One is short, single page form that looks simple and is easy to underestimate. The other one is complex multi-page investment form that's much closer to what organizations are actually dealing with in production today. We'll then go through both automated and manual testing. You will see us use PDF accessibility checker or pack tool to quickly surface structural issues. But just as importantly, we'll do manual checks to reveal real user barriers that tools don't catch. That includes things like keyboard navigation, reading order, etc., which are often where forms fail even when automated results look good or acceptable. After that, we'll move into live remediation. Lavanya will fix accessibility issues in real time directly into in the documents so that you can see what actually changes and why those changes matter. And finally, we will retest and revalidate. We'll run the tools again after the fixes so that you can clearly see what's improved, what issues were resolved, and how small structural changes can make a measurable difference. The goal here is not to show perfect PDF. It's to show what realistic testing and remediation looks like on kinds of form most teams already have. A little more context for the two forms you're about to see. The first form is short, single page form used in investment and estate or capital management, typically by financial institutions. It's used when someone has passed away and their investment account needs to be protected while, while legal documents such as probate are processed. In simple terms, it allows the executor to tell the investment firm that please don't release any funds yet, make adjustments only to preserve the value of the account. So when this form is used, it is usually a time sensitive and emotional situation. The form looks simple, but delays or mistakes can have serious consequences. And if the form isn't accessible to keyboard or screen reader user, even small issues, they can become major blockers. And that is why it's a very good example of a simple form that still has real accessibility risk. The second form is a multi-page investment club account agreement used by banks and financial institutions. It's for groups of people investing together, such as friends or colleagues forming an investment club. This form defines who the member are, who can trade, and the legal responsibilities involved. It's not just something people skim. Users need to read it carefully, enter information, navigate tables, lists, and understand what they are agreeing to before signing. And because it's long and structurally dense, accessibility issues can scale very quickly. If headings, tables, or form fields aren't tagged correctly, assistive technology can, or users who are using it, they can lose context very easily. Together, these two forms give us a realistic view of both ends of the spectrum. A short form that looks easy and a complex one that reflects what many organizations deal with in production today. With that, Lavanya, I'll pass it on to you for the live testing and remediation bit. Thank you. I'll stop sharing so that you can share your screen.
Yep. Thanks, Aisha.
Pleasure is mine.
So let me quickly share my screen. All right. So as Aisha has laid a proper context for both the forms that we are going to deal with, for accessibility issues. Here we go. I have opened up the simple form, form number 1, in the AEM Forms designer that we all can see right now. It's a simple form, a single pager form. Well, doesn't it look very well defined? It's easy to read. All the structures are properly designed here. And of course, technically, all the required information is present intact within this form. What could go wrong, right, with this perfect form? But that is where all the accessibility challenges hide under these kind of visually appealing forms. So just to highlight on those accessibility challenges, I'd bring this form back on the pack tool. What is a pack tool? This is a PDF accessibility checker that would then verify if our particular form conforms and is compliant with different accessibility rules, the so-called success criteria. Well, these check the basic accessibility success criteria and confirm if the PDF is verified for those standards. Well, why do we have to verify all these for the forms? Is because then the assistive tool technologies like screen readers or keyboard control users then would help navigate the users with special needs to properly fill the form, and the form gets efficiently interacted with as well. So just like I said, I'm going to bring up this particular form onto the pack tool. So when I'm going to bring this up, we'll see the different issues that we face as part of the accessibility standard. Well, we see that there are different kinds of issues here, and there are alternative descriptions as well. So let me bring it back. All right, so to resolve these issues, we go back to the designer and we bring back the simple form here. And then, as you can see, there were these alternative descriptions that we need to go and fix it for, which we have provided the Greeley logo with, and which is nothing but a custom screen reader text, a custom text that we need to provide, an alternative text for an image like that. And then there is this particular heading for the form, which also needs to be set with a rule. So usually we just go ahead and set the rule for the heading. There is a subheading, which also needs to be defined with a particular role called heading level 1. And then we also have different kinds of fields which require the context. In this case, the context for different fields are provided, be it the caption or be it the description of the field. And then we also have certain fields, like in this case, where we got the diseased field, which does not have a caption to it. In that case, we also provide a screen reader precedence, either with a tooltip, which is where we provide the details here, or with a custom reader text, which is where the details under the custom screen reader text is provided. And then as we can see, each of these fields also are configured with something called caption, which means the screen reader is going to read the caption of each of these fields. And so if we are supposed to go, let's say for the diseased, and we are going to change this from the tooltip to just go with the custom reader text, we make sure that the heading is all properly aligned with heading level 1, because this is going to be the first heading of the entire form. We go and we also correct this with heading level 2, which is what the hierarchy should be with, as we could already see that the form was already configured with something called heading level and then the heading level 1, which also caused the structural element issues that we saw just in the pack tool right away. Here, the structure elements. So we are just going to correct that bit here by configuring the heading of the form to be at heading level 1 and not heading, by configuring the second heading of the form to be at heading level 2. Let's just save this now. And I'm going to label this as the corrected one. Yeah, this got saved properly. And I'm going to bring this up on the pack tool. Now, there we go. The structural elements have also got completed and they have got corrected. Now, what does this mean? Do you think this form is completely accessible, right? It's perfectly resolved, even with the pack tool, which is the assistive technology verification, and confirms that the form is completely accessible. Well, to our surprise, this is not the case. Why? Because I'm going to bring this back onto the designer to highlight some of the issues that the pack tool thinks is already resolved and this form is completely accessible. But only the experts know whether this form has been completely accessible and is righteously available for the screen readers to navigate through this form. One such classical issue is the tab ordering of the form. So as we can see in this simple form, I have corrected this as we can see the label of the PDF form. The order of the different elements in the form, which as far as the tabbing order goes from left to right. So we see that there is 1, 2, 3, and then there is no 4 here. It has rather actually jumped directly to 6, and then 5, then that goes to 7, and then there we go to 13. So we can see the order is not proper. It can go back and forth in the form, and it can navigate in such a way that will confuse the end user and will end up not filling up the form efficiently. All right. So we are going to just fix that tabbing order here by doing a custom tabbing order right now as I'm highlighting it here. So let's go ahead and reorder the fields for 6 and 5. So the 6 order T9 goes above 5. So as you can see, the tabbing order has just now got changed. And then we need to change the order of number 13, which is right here, which is called T12. We are going to move that after 7, just like so. And we can see that the ordering has got changed. And we move on to check if there is any other order that is getting missed. Well, if it is out of order, we make it right. So we see that it's 13. Now we have a 15, which should be actually 14. So we go to the number 15 here, which is T41, and move it above 14. So we have got that order right. And then again, there is another issue here with 15 and 16. So the number 16 goes above 15. And finally, when we see the last final field, no one expects that number 4 goes here. So number 4 would be moved down all the way after 16. And so we can see that all the elements now are rightly aligned from left to right, which enables the tool to read the form properly and engage the user efficiently in filling the form. And last but not least is the link which we provide. Again, when we go back to the hierarchy, we can see that the link is also having a particular context added to it. So that is enabling the user to know that it is a link and it has to be clicked, right? So now I'm going to save this after the manual verification. And the quickest verification that I would also like to do is the heading level, which I already described about it while we were checking it on the pack. These are two of the classic examples that should be always verified beyond the pack tools verification as well, so that we know the particular form that has been corrected for accessibility conforms to the compliance and guides the user efficiently in filling up the form. So this is the simple form and I'm going to save this. Let me close this and we are going to move to the next form, which is quite complex. I'll tell you why this is complex. This is complex because not only it has 5 pages, but because of the different components that this complete form comprises of, there are different components that are present in this form. So the first classic one is the image. As you can see in this form, that has not got set yet. So now I'm going to go and quickly add up the content for it, which gives the context of the logo. So I just say it as Bank of Greeley logo here. So it gets the context here and it is tagged. Let me just save this first nature of the issue. The second type of issue is, as we can see here, this form, the first page itself contains different bullet lists here. And each of this bullet lists, like number 1, 2, 3, also contains sub bullet lists. So all of these need to be tagged properly by assigning different roles, as we can see here, this role. In order to do that, as this is a sub bullet list, each of these should get wrapped in a container called a subform. And all of these subforms then get wrapped in a parent container. I'm going to show that to you right now. So the first bullet list gets wrapped in a container. The second bullet list gets wrapped as well. The third bullet list. And now, as you can see, each of these have got wrapped in a subform. And we kind of grab all these three now because these are sub bullet pointers. We wrap them again in a parent container. So this is how the proper structure for a bullet list should be formed in a form to get corrected for accessibility. Now that's not it. We also have to tag each of these parent forms with a particular role. So that becomes accessible to the screen reader or any assistive tool. So let's go with the parents of form, and I'm going to assign that with a role called list, which makes sense, right? It's the parent container. We take the first child and assign this a list item role. The second child, again with list item row. Third child again with a list item row. So I have now shown you how we resolve two different kind of issues. One is to tag the image logo. The next one is to properly structure all these complex bullet lists or the items that is contained within each of these parent bullet items. Now, as part of fixing this process, I have just given you one classic example, but you also need to wrap the parent bullet points again with the parent container and assign roles appropriately, as I have done for this one single example. Now let's move on to the next classic issue. As this is a complex form, we also get to see a complex structure like a table. So when we have a complex structure like a table, it is really essential that we also assign roles or tag each of the structure in this table so that the screen reader is properly able to navigate the entire table in the form for the end user. So as part of it, each of the components in the table get a role assigned to it automatically. In this case, for table 1, it is the role which is called table. For the header row, we have the role called header row that gets assigned. There is this body row 1, which gets assigned with a role called body row. That is, it gets tagged with the role body row. Similarly with row 2, row 3, and row 4. Now, that's not it. We also go with the different interactive fields that the end user tend to fill in when they are going to efficiently interact with the form. So with that example, we see that these 3 or these 5 interactive fields on the first row definitely should have some field context imbibed for them. So the classic example is that this field has this content provided so that it gives a full context of this field. Similarly, I can cross-verify that each of these fields have different kind of context attached to them. So the user knows what they really have to fill in. Like in this case, it's going to be full name of the member 3. It is position title of member 3. It's going to be date of birth for the member 3, social insurance number for member 3, and so on. So there is citizenship of member 3 as well. So I'm going to check for the last row. Well, it does not contain it. So all that I do is I grab this context of the field and provide it here as a content, just changing the number to 4, as we know it is going to be for row 4, which is member 4. And similarly, I continue providing these contexts for each of these fields where they are not present, and just completely change the number so the user knows what needs to be done when they interact with the form. So now this becomes 4. This is from member 3. I go copy it here for member 4. And the last one. Take this, and we're just going to put that here. And yes, so now this is the table structure with the field content and the context that has been added for the fields. This is the third type of issue that we have encountered and we have seen it. And now I'm going to save this with corrected suffix. So we know this is the form that got corrected. I go back to the folder to see if there is this corrected form. I grab the pack tool again. So this is just to verify and show it to you that even though I tried correcting different nature of issues in the form, it is not entirely corrected. And so it's going to show up with issues. So just to emphasize on the fact that the entire form needs to be corrected for each and every component of the form. Until all of them are not corrected, these errors don't get resolved. This is just to emphasize on the fact that I have shown different issues and how to fix them and go about different kinds of issues. But since this is a complex form, this is to highlight that it takes more time to fix such a form, not only for the pack tool, which is automated testing, but again, we already know that the classic example of tab ordering, which also needs to be fixed manually, this needs an expert's eye, emphasizing on the fact that manual verification is also very critical and vital for us to fix. And then that is when both of the automated testing and manual testing complement each other, and thereby we get a completely accessible form for the end users, which could be navigated using the assistive tool technologies. So the classic example here is that when we went to the tab ordering, yeah, we see that the logo has changed to 24. So what I would do is I'll move it here to 1. And so now the tab ordering, as we had planned for the simple form, we just cross verify it quickly if it's all in the right place. And if not, we are going to correct the same way as we did it for the simple form. With the time constraint, I would also like to show you the proper page structure of the second complex form that we had worked on, so that we can show you how each of those bullet lists get properly structured to avoid the accessibility alternative description issues that surface around. So in this case, as you can see here, we have this properly wrapped with this subform as I was demoing it to you. And this is also wrapped properly, again in a parent subform, and so on. And then there is another parent subform which also wraps this bullets along with the sublist here that we can see. So this is just an example of a proper structure. So once all of these issues are resolved, including pack tool verification, and most importantly, the manual verification, we can say a particular form is completely accessible for an end user. Not only that, we test them through the screen reader text and any other assistive technology tool. Right now, all that I wanted to demo is done. Thank you. Over to Aisha. Thank you, Aisha.
Thank you, Lavanya. That was very informative, and I'm sure people who are in attendance today, they'll say the same. I'll reshare my screen. Great. Now that you've seen both forms tested and remediated live, partially remediated because there's a lot going on in the second form. It's just not, uh, you know, half an hour job, clearly. And I want to reflect on and pause and reflect on what actually happened because biggest takeaway isn't the tools we used, it's the pattern behind issues and fixes. We worked with two very different forms. One was short, looked simple. The other was long, dense, and structurally very complicated. Yet the issues we fixed were surprisingly consistent. In both cases, the biggest barrier, they weren't visual problems. They were structural issues. Things like incorrect tab order, missing headings, or lack of meaningful structure, missing context for users, relying on assistive technology. We saw how automated testing helped surface obvious problems quickly, but also how manual testing revealed issues that tools alone don't catch, especially around keyboard navigation, focus order, and proper grouping of form elements for better screen reader output. We then fix those issues without redesigning the forms, without changing business logic, and without rebuilding anything from scratch. And that's the key takeaway. The next logical question is usually that how do these fixes relate to WCAG? So in the next slide, I'm going to map the issues we addressed and touched, and we'll map it to specific WCAG success criteria so that you can clearly see how practical remediation aligns with compliance requirements. And this is where we connect what you saw to what WCAG actually expects. So let me map out the issues we saw and fixed with the success criteria. When we added or corrected alt text to a logo, we were addressing WCAG 1.1.1, ensuring that non-text content such as images or graphics or what have you is available to users who can't see it. When we added or when we fixed tabbing and focus order, that map directly to WCAG 2.1.1 and 2.4.3. These criteria ensure that users can navigate forms using a keyboard and that focus moves in a logical way, in a predictable way. When we define proper heading levels and hierarchy in the form, that map to WCAG 1.3.1 and 2.4.6. This is about making sure structure isn't just visual, but programmatically available to assistive technologies so that they can interpret the document correctly. Like Lavanya provided heading levels, correct heading level 1 and 2, and correct roles to the lists. This is so that the assistive technologies or whosoever is going through the form using those can understand the document correctly. In a complex form, we also spend time defining lists and tables properly. This allows screen readers, again, to announce them correctly so users know whether they are moving through a list or navigating a table. This work again maps back to 1.3 3.1, which is about preserving relationship between content so they are understandable without relying on visual layout. And when we improved field context on fields that lacked enough information for non-visual users, such as table in the second form, we were addressing WCAG 3.3.2, which focuses on clear labels and instructions so users know exactly what information is required. What we saw in demo focused on some of the most visible and common accessibility issues, specifically around structure, navigation, and context. But I want to call out that there are additional WCAG rules that apply to forms, even though they didn't surface in today's exercise. Some requirements are about how a form behaves, not just how it's structured. For example, when user moves focus into a field or enters information, the form should not suddenly change context or trigger unexpected actions. That's covered under WCAG 3.2.1 and 3.2.2. There are also requirements around consistency, specifically in longer or more complicated forms. If the same type of control appears multiple times, it must be identified and behave consistently. And that's WCAG 3.2.4 at level AA. And it's specifically relevant for XDP forms with repeated sections or repeated actions. Another important area is error handling. Very important. WCAG doesn't just require that errors be detectable, it requires that errors be clearly identified, that users are given guidance to fix them. And for legal or financial forms, that users have a way to review or reverse submissions. Now, these are level AA requirements, and they apply directly to many of the forms organizations use every day. Well, the key point here is this. Not every WCAG requirement will show up in a short demo, but they still matter. Now that we have seen the kinds of accessibility issues that show up in forms and how they can be fixed, the real challenge often becomes scale. In many organizations, it's not about fixing just one form. It's one person or one small team responsible for hundreds or thousands of forms already in production, with more being created all the time. That's where relying on manual remediation alone starts to break down. This is the point where scalability really matters. And this is where we see a strong role for AI to support accessibility work. And as a part of this journey, we have partnered with Oproma using their AI-powered accessibility platform Fraser to help address this challenge at scale. By leveraging an AI-powered platform, we can take the same principle and fixes you saw today and apply them across large forms inventories much more efficiently. That includes everything from automated accessibility audit reports to automatic remediation of many common issues, as well as the ability to run ongoing and scheduled accessibility checks that are tailored to your forms and systems. This helps shift accessibility from one-off effort into something that is continuous, scalable, and sustainable. Also, the goal is not to replace expertise or manual testing, but to make it possible for teams to keep up, move faster, and maintain compliance even as forms, systems, and requirements continue to evolve. I also want to briefly touch on another way AI shows up in accessibility journey, and that is through VoiceForms. At 4 our approach to VoiceForms is Darian, an AI-powered assistant designed to make form filling more accessible, inclusive, and less frustrating. Instead of forcing everyone to interact with the form in the same way, voice forms allow users to complete forms in a way that works for them. For some users, they may prefer to type, right? And others may benefit from voice-based interaction, particularly users with mobility or vision challenges. And for many, clear guided prompts make the difference between guessing and completing the form confidently. What's important is that voice forms don't change the underlying process. They integrate with the existing system and your approved forms that you have in production today, which means organizations can improve accessibility and usability without disrupting existing workflows or without rebuilding everything from scratch. The result is better experience for users, quick turnaround time, fewer errors for them, less frustration, and higher completion rates, while organizations benefit from cleaner data and reduced abandonment. Therefore, it's voice forms aren't just about replacing forms. It's about augmenting what you have. They're about improving how people interact with them, making accessibility easier to achieve and easier to sustain. So, if you're thinking this all makes sense, but where do we actually begin? So, this is the simplest way to start. We offer 1.5 hour custom working session where we focus specifically on your organization. We look at your current state, what forms you have today, how they are being used, and where accessibility challenges are likely showing up. We align on accessibility standards that apply to you, and we walk away with clear, high level next step recommendations like what to focus on first, what can wait, and how to move forward without feeling overwhelmed. This isn't about jumping straight into remediation. It's about getting more clarity, reducing uncertainty, and setting a realistic path forward. And if you would like to learn more or explore whether this makes sense for your organization, you can anytime visit us at www.4point.com. And with that, thank you for your time. And I'm happy to take questions. I see there are a couple questions in the Q&A. First is, if there is one thing that consistently makes form inaccessible regardless of industry or complexity, what is it? So if there's one thing that consistently makes form inaccessible regardless of industry is the flow of the form, particularly keyboard navigation and the tab order. As simple as it sounds, getting the tabbing right is often the most first, important step. And if a user can't move through a form in a logical or a predictable order using a keyboard, the form becomes very difficult to use, specifically for screen reader users who rely on that flow to understand the structure and sequence. And I say this to an extent because as we have seen today that there are multiple things that need to come together before a form can truly be considered accessible. But fixing tab order alone can immediately improve experience and remove major barriers. Next is, if a team can only fix a few things in existing forms, where should they focus first? So if your team can fix only few things at first, again, I would like to reiterate, check your navigation, check your tab order. As I mentioned earlier, getting the tabbing right, it has a huge impact, right? It helps the screen reader user to go through your form. And the next thing I would recommend is doing a screen reader test. Sometimes even when tabbing is fixed, certain fields don't provide enough context for someone who's navigating from form non-visually. So that's where you can start to uncover issues that tools won't catch. And the last one is, sorry, I lost the message. How do we use WCAG as a practical guide rather than treating it as compliance checklist? Well, for this, follow the 4 core principles of WCAG, which is perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And think how these principles apply to your existing forms. Instead of asking which checklist you need to tick off, ask questions like, who do I make this form understandable for? Sorry, how do I make this form understandable for someone who can't see it? How does someone use it who can't, like, who's using a screen reader to navigate through the form? That naturally leads you to things like providing clear labels and providing more meaningful instructions to the form. Well, with that, we've reached top of the hour, and I want to respect everyone's time. But thank you for attending the webinar. And if you have any questions, do reach out to us. And I hope it was informative for you. Thank you.